A while ago I did a video on how to verify if a lower ball joint is worn. So I went into quite a bit of detail about lower ball joints and how they're configured and how they fit into the steering knuckle. So you might want to watch that if you need some more information. But in that video I mentioned that it can be very misleading sometimes, depending on what kind of vehicle you have, as to whether or not the lower ball joint is worn. So I always recommend checking the maintenance manual for your particular vehicle, and I'm going to try to illustrate in this video why it can be kind of misleading depending on what type of lower ball joint configuration you have as to whether or not it's worn. So the vehicle that we're going to look at in a couple of minutes has this type of a pressed in ball joint. Here it is here. Here's the exact same ball joint with the boot removed. The boot is down below here filled with grease. So here's our steering knuckle. We're looking at this towards, basically, if we were underneath the vehicle, looking out towards the outside of the vehicle here. On this side, if I turn it around, is the hub. So what I'm going to show is with this type of configuration here, and again, I definitely recommend getting your Chilton or Haynes manual for your vehicle if you're going to be looking into this kind of thing, and follow the instructions. But the ball joint is pressed down into the steering knuckle. So it's pressed down here, and that's the stud we see. This is the pressed in one, and we see the stud coming out here. Now, I'd like to actually show that today, but it's really hot here and I got to get this vehicle back on the road. So another day I'm going to do one about getting the ball joint out and pressing it back in. And the maintenance manual for this vehicle basically recommends the vehicle has to be safely supported. You jack it up, put the weight of the vehicle on the jack, and then you have to jack up under the lower control arm, take the weight off of the lower control arm to check the lower ball joint. Now the reason we have to check it this way is because on this style of ball joint, here's our steering knuckle, there's our lower control arm, here's the boot of our ball joint. And the reason that this has to be done in this fashion is because with the strut putting pressure down on the lower control arm, everything is going to seem nice and tight. And if I take a pry bar, this vehicle is jacked, and I move that, excuse me, we don't see any movement on that lower ball joint. Everything appears to be tight. But that's because the lower control arm is being forced down. So, the maintenance manual advises that we put a jack under the lower control arm and jack it up about 2 or 3 inches. Now, because of space constrictions here, what I've done is I have the vehicle on the scissor jack. I got some blocks, and I'm just going to lower that now onto those blocks. So I'm just slowly bringing down the scissor jack, and you can probably see over here the lower control arm is biting into those blocks. So now that's taking the weight off of this point. So now if I take my pry bar, hopefully I don't move the camera here too much, and I pry in here. Actually, I can't do that and have the camera. I'm going to show it another way. If I shake this, that doesn't look too bad. But if I actually put an upward pressure on it, after I lower the jack a bit more, and again, follow all your safety procedures for whatever manual you're following. We're taking some of the weight here off of the scissor jack and putting it onto the lower control arm. Now, this ball joint, which is worn in here, within this boot, and we can't see it, without that weight, I can actually lift underneath the steering knuckle, and you can see how much movement there is. That is severely worn. And that's why if you get a bad lower ball joint, you'll get a clunking noise.